Welcome to the 3DownNation podcast. I'm John Hodge with JC Abbott. How was your day today, JC? I have nothing exciting to do in my opener, so I'm just going to ask you, how was your day?
It's been delightful, John. It really has. And you know what? Thank you for asking.
I don't care. People don't care. It's not interesting. Welcome to the 3DownNation podcast, fellas. I'm Justin Dunk, joined by John Hodge and JC Abbott. Fellas, that was pathetic last week. Sorry, Hodge, I'm looking at you, but my goodness, there was no energy in your welcome. It's like you felt like you had to say it, and then you had nothing funny to say other than just a long cheese. That was okay. That I might give a passing grade, but the rest of that intro, F.
Well, I'll take a leaf out of your book then, and I'll talk about when I played at the University of Guelph. Canadian quarterback, and, have a drink. Canadian quarterback. Hey, let's talk about Taylor Elgersma for no reason.
We will today.
Let's do it. And Tre Ford. Let's talk about Larry Justanis. I know it's been 50 years, but he was a Canadian quarterback, and he was really good. Let's do it.
Bro, that would have been way more interesting as an opener last week.
I agree. My energy's probably not as high as yours for the introductions, but that is because I am sometimes worried about your heart palpitations. The amount of energy you put in is overwhelming. All I see is you eating cucumbers and drinking water, but you sound like Red Bull and I don't know. Is there a food that gives you energy? I don't know.
I'm sure there's lots of foods that give you energy.
Well, I guess technically,
I'm worried you're going to burst a mic half
Kale,
the time.
Broccoli.
Kale and broccoli. No. No. I like broccoli. I do
like broccoli too. I've never had kale and thought I'm bursting with energy at this stage. Now, I'm rarely bursting with energy anyway, but definitely not after I eat some kale. I just want to circle back. You don't care how my day is?
Yeah, that's rude.
That's
bro.
hurtful.
I think our listeners do care about how JC's day going.
Listeners,
And if
get
you're
in
listening,
the comments.
Tweet at Justin Dunk. I care about JC's day. Thank you.
There you go.
Let him know.
Makes
Give him
me
some
feel
love.
seen.
I do care. I just don't think it has any place in a podcast introduction that could be much more entertaining, fellas. Don't get it twisted, though. Larry Justanis, if I could speak some words today, he didn't play 50 years ago. He's not quite that old. He played in the mid-1990s.
I was being facetious. But there are some other good Canadian quarterbacks from that era, none who converted to the CFL, but there are some legends in their own right, and we are going to talk about a couple of Canadian QBs on today's show.
Let's get to it, boys. We're discussing Canadian quarterback Nathan Rourke signing a contract extension with the BC Lions.
The CFL's salary cap increasing yet again.
Dakota Shepley signing with the Toronto Argonauts.
Brady Oliveira and Milt Stegall kind of being honored in Winnipeg.
What do you mean not on? It is an honor, I think. Well, we'll talk about it. And no Canadian players qualifying for the Super Bowl. But first,
Hodge forced us to lead with this topic, so I guess we'll start with it. CFL free agency is set to get underway with the communication window opening on Sunday, February 1st at noon Eastern Time. Pending free agents will be permitted to speak with teams around the league, though contracts cannot be signed until free agency officially opens on Tuesday, February 10th at noon ET. Hodge, which CFL team needs to be the most aggressive in signing free agents?
The segment was your idea. I don't know. I'm getting thrown under the bus for a second time. Look, I would have said the Toronto Argonauts a week or two ago, but the reality is they've done a lot of work already, right? And I want to highlight that really quick. The Toronto Argonauts, we mentioned Shepley off the top. We'll talk about him a little more later on, but I think Shepley single-handedly takes that offensive line and puts some respect on it. The offensive line was a disaster in 2025. I think Shepley could be a most outstanding offensive lineman candidate type of player for that team. He can play guard, he can play center, he can honestly play tackle as well. I'm excited to see what he can do. I also think Adarius Pickett, one of the league's best defenders. Peyton Logan, 2025 was ruined by injury, but has been explosive in the past. And Dwayne Hendricks, a much needed pickup at defensive tackle. So my answer is going to be a little different, boys. I'm going to opt for the Winnipeg Blue Bombers. And the reason I say that is because this team attacked free agency in 2025 in a way we hadn't seen forever. And it spectacularly blew up in their faces. Like James Vaughters was by far the most productive addition they had. A guy whose sources have led me to believe, by the way, is not going to be brought back for 2026, put up 6 sacks. The rest was a nightmare. Dylan Mitchell, complete bust. Jonathan Jones didn't even finish the year with the team. Shea Patterson, I think, lasted 2 days in camp. Logan got hurt, right? Like the free agent additions, which admittedly I was high on at the time, did not pan out at all. Now, I think the Bombers deserve credit for adding Tim White. We'll talk about that a little bit more. But I think that there are still needs on this roster. I see needs at receiver still. I wonder if Dejon Brissett or Tommy Neild could potentially be in Winnipeg's crosshairs as a couple of impact Canadians to complement Nick Dembski. We know that Kevin Sklarcius got benched late last year as the team's second Canadian starter in the receiving core. I think when you look at the offensive line, this team could potentially be in the Coulter Woodmansee or Jarrell Broxton sweepstakes. For my money, by far and away the two best free agent offensive linemen available. Defensive line on that interior, Mike Rose, Jake Ceresna available. I believe the Bombers are going to make a push for one of those two. And for what it's worth, Zach Collaros has made no secret of how much he hates playing against Mike Rose because Rose is so darn good. So I think Zach Collaros would be the happiest camper in the world if Mike Rose was wearing blue and gold. And then at the corner position, a position, I mean, Winnipeg, I think, is great at half. I think they're good at Sam, but their cornerbacks really let them down in 25. I think Jonathan Moxey, who is a standout with the Hamilton Tiger Cats in 25, would be a perfect fit there. So my answer, team that should be most aggressive after swinging and having a bunch of misses last year. They need more doubles, triples, and dare I say a home run or two, the Winnipeg Blue Bombers, to get back up from 4th in the West Division.
I appreciate that little fake out there, Hodge, and I don't think you're wrong with the Winnipeg Blue Bombers. I think there's a lot of work that needs to be done in the Manitoba capital. But I'm going to be direct with my answer. It's the Ottawa Redblacks, because unlike the Toronto Argonauts, they haven't done the same degree of heavy lifting with those early releases and signings that the Argos have. Yes, they went out and acquired Niles Morgan via trade. That's a good move for them. I think that could be an upgrade in the middle of the defense. But you also saw them part ways with a guy like Adarius Pickett, who is at the very top of the list when it comes to strong side linebackers in the CFL, even at his current age. And frankly, as much as I like Bennett Williams as a prospect and an up-and-coming guy, I think you're going to see a downgrade there. I think there's a lot of spots where you want to shore things up if you're the Redblacks, whether that's the offensive line, whether that's the defensive line, whether that's adding another linebacker, and certainly finding some talent in that secondary that has been criticized often over the last few years. You've got the receivers. They've signed Eugene Lewis and Justin Hardy. You got those guys under contract, but I think there is more juice that needs to be added to this lineup if you're fully going to maximize that splash move that you made in going out and making Ryan Dinwiddie your head coach and general manager.
That's the exact same team that I'm looking at, JC. I think Ottawa really could help themselves by adding an impact defender at every level along the defensive line, perhaps another linebacker to go along with Niles Morgan. Jovan Santos Knox was granted an early release leading into free agency, so there could be another spot there in the linebacking group. And JC, you noted it, at defensive back as well. Now we'll see who actually gets to the window, but when you look at Ottawa's offense, it seems like by and large part the offensive line could be back intact. If it's a healthy group, I think it's definitely one that can be competitive and help the Redblacks potentially get back into the playoff picture. You noted the receivers, Geno Lewis, Justin Hardy, Khalil Pimpleton, man, I can't talk today. Keelan White had a great rookie season. Nick Mardner has started games, so I don't necessarily think that you need a splash there in that group. William Stanback is a pending free agent, so perhaps they'll have to bring in another American at running back. There was some talk, and we asked Ryan Dinwiddie about Daniel Adeboboye, and there are people in the league who believe Adeboboye could be a starter as a national in the Canadian Football League and do really well, including AJ Ouellette, who's hard to impress as a running back. Now, he is biased because he spent time with Adeboboye in Toronto, but nonetheless, I think there's some people that believe that he could get the job done. But you still, if you're Ottawa, probably want to try to at least bring in a veteran American if you can. And I just look at the defense. You noted Darius Pickett not being there anymore, going back to Toronto. I think that unit has to get better. You look at Bryce Carter on one edge. They could use an impact pass rusher there, either from the interior or on the outside. And then the secondary, there could be some pieces that make it to the window and ultimately free agency that I think would upgrade that secondary that has some, guys that might be intriguing. I think CJ Colden has flashed, but people around the league say that he's inconsistent. You likely go with Alonzo Adai at safety, but if a guy like Marc-Antoine Dequoy, for example, becomes available, and I don't necessarily think he wants to leave Montreal, it's a very short trip to Ottawa. How do you not make that sign there for a guy that's made a bunch of plays against the Ottawa Redblacks for the Alouettes over the years and plays against Ryan Dinwiddie when he was in Toronto, too, if you remember the East Final from a couple of years ago. So that's the team that I look at in terms of trying to create a great foundation for Ryan Dinwiddie to build on, to get back to the playoffs. This team just two short years ago, was in the playoffs, 9-8-1, looked like they were on the rise. They had the same records as the Saskatchewan Roughriders, fellas, but went in completely opposite directions in 2025, 4-14, last in the CFL, whereas the Riders built on that 9-8-1 season and went on to win the Grey Cup.
I like the Redblacks, and I do think that they're ahead of the game this year a little bit in some of the names they haven't brought back, and that might sound a little bit harsh, but I think when you look at their free agent list from years past, they would be bringing guys back 1, 2, and in some cases 3 years, maybe past their prime, right? And I would see some of these press releases and go, really? Like this guy is back? Like, if this guy was on the free agent market, I'm not sure anybody else would sign him. And Ottawa's bringing him back year after year after year. And this year, the Redblacks have not brought a ton of their incumbents back. And again, it might sound harsh, but obviously what they've been doing there for the past few seasons has not been good enough. They made the playoffs in 24, as Justin illustrated, but they got their butts kicked in the East Semi, and that's their only playoff appearance since pre-pandemic, right? That's not good enough. So a couple of defenders who I would look at for them, if I was the Redblacks, I would be all on A.J. Allen, a difference maker for the Saskatchewan Roughriders in a huge way. Lucas Cormier, I thought was really solid for the Redblacks when he got to play this past season. So you've got a built-in Canadian backup, rotational guy at weak side linebacker. A.J. Allen learned from one of the best in Jameer Thurman over the years. Does not look likely that A.J. Allen's going to be back in Saskatchewan. They've had a ton of success in Riderville bringing a bunch of guys back. But obviously, as Jeremy O'Day said to the media on Friday, right? You can't bring everybody back. It's just not possible when you win a championship. So that would be at the top of my priority list if I was the Redblacks. And if I did not succeed in getting A.J. Allen, I would want to bring in Wynton McManus, a guy who has played Mike, but I think has the athleticism to play just about anywhere. I think Wynton McManus could play Will. I think Wynton McManus could play edge. Heck, I don't think Wynton McManus would struggle at safety. Like, the guy is just a monster. He was injured for most of 2025. Assuming he's back healthy, he's a player who, if I'm Ryan Dinwiddie, I'm trying to get 100% my guy Wynton McManus up to the Redblacks, pick the Argonauts' pocket. And we know that the Argonauts already have Cam Judge, who's going to start at one spot, and Isaac Darkangelo, who they really like, re-upped at the other spot. So at this point in time, it seems unlikely. I'm not saying it's not going to happen, but it seems unlikely McManus will be back in Toronto. So I'm intrigued to see if Ottawa could be the landing spot for McManus.
The other element in Ottawa that we would be remiss if we didn't talk about is quarterback, right? Drew Brown got sort of a soft vote of confidence as the starter by Ryan Dinwiddie with his new contract, but we saw last year he struggled to stay healthy. And I don't know if he is their guy long-term yet. I don't even know if Ryan Dinwiddie knows that. So you probably want to upgrade your backup position. And we just saw today Jeremy O'Day talking to the media in Regina, indicating that yeah, it seems likely that Jake Maier is going to hit the market. I wonder if that's a fit for him in Ottawa as a place where he can be that 1B behind Drew Brown. And if Brown struggles or he goes down and gets hurt, Maier is a competent starter who can take over the reins long term. That makes a lot of sense to me and would be something I would be looking at if I was Dinwiddie.
Lots to touch on here, fellas. Hodge, I think you crushed it by talking about Winton McManus. If he goes to Ottawa, I think that's a game changer. Yes, on the field, we know he's great, but from a leadership standpoint, the Redblacks really could use that foundational leader because Drew Brown, at least until this point, hasn't shown that he's that guy. I think McManus could be that dude for Ryan Dinwiddie in his first season with Ottawa. And then JC's kind of already done this, but put ourselves in Jake Maier's shoes or think back to just 1 year ago. If you're Cody Fajardo, you're going to look around the league and say, okay, I want to be able to play. I don't want to sit behind Trevor Harris for another entire season if he stays healthy again. I'd like to be able to get on the field. Where's the most uncertain quarterback spot? And the obvious one is Ottawa, even just from the pay scale. Drew Brown is the 9th highest paid starting quarterback in the Canadian Football League. That's great for Ottawa because it means they'll have money to spend. But if I'm Jake Maier, I'm looking at what Drew Brown did or didn't do last season and thinking, yeah, I'm going there with a coach that I have not necessarily been with before, but Dinwiddie has familiarity with Jake Maier throughout the scouting process when he was with the Calgary Stampeders. They didn't actually crossover. So I think that could make a lot of sense for Ottawa to solidify that backup quarterback position with a guy who started games in this league and looked really good in his early years in Calgary. But I think the real key is for Ottawa to get some game changers on defense. I think of a guy like CJ Revis can change the complexion of that secondary or strong side linebacker. Really, wherever you put that guy on the field, he flies around, makes plays at a high level. And Jeremy O'Day, as you guys have alluded to, seemed to indicate that if the Riders go a certain way with the ratio, that Revis might not be back in Saskatchewan. And it would make some sense when you just look at who's on the roster and who played well at the end of last season. Antoine Brooks Jr. looked great at Sam. He's on a rookie contract. And the team has already re-signed Canadians Jackson Ford and Nelson Lacombo, who have varying degrees of starting experience at safety. And Jaden Dahlke has been brought back as well. He can play at that safety spot too. So it would seem like Revis could be somebody that's squeezed out there. That said, Jeremy O'Day wasn't really going to write anything off. But I think Ottawa, as Dinwiddie said, flat out on the radio down there, I believe to AJ Jakubek on TSN 1200, that he wanted to be aggressive in free agency. Well, Ottawa not only needs to be aggressive, they need to get some pen to paper to get that turnaround going in the nation's capital. And guys, as far as some of the other teams, I think we should probably spread around some of the analysis here. I think you could probably for another year expect Ed Hervey to be active in Edmonton, the general manager with the Elks, as he looks to have that team continue its sort of late season surge here. And the one intriguing part to me, guys, about what Hervey showed last year and what I think he's showing us with the roster is that he's getting impact Canadians, but not necessarily always just having the backup. So if that guy goes down, you have a drop off in play. I think he's looking at starting more than the 7 required Canadians, and that's what they did coming out of free agency last year going into the season. I think it's very smart, actually, and it's kind of a trend we're seeing a little bit more and more throughout the league where you just get the best guy, have a lot of Canadian depth, and instead of when you have an injury at one position, you have enough depth that you don't just have to put the backup in there and you're actually playing the best high-quality Canadians.
Well, and if you draft well, you should always have depth, right? It's important to draft well because guys are locked into cheap 3-year deals, right? If you draft the right guy, you've got a built-in depth piece for 3 years, which is important.
The draft doesn't matter though, Hodge. That's what some fans say, at least.
Well, of course, yeah. Why bother with the draft at all? Canadians can't even play football. But the reason and look, I don't think the Elks are a bad answer. They missed the playoffs, just like Toronto and Ottawa did, obviously. However, with that being said, I think if you look at Joel DeBlanco, drafting well, Brock Mogensen, Kenneth Logan Jr., JJ Ross, like they had so many guys flash late last season. I think there's a lot of incumbents who could step up and take a big step in 26. I also think one spot where they're going to get a lot better, even just from injury coming back, is Noah Curtis, a guy who was an absolute beast for them, I thought, in 24. Missed all 25 with injury. I think he's going to be impactful on the D-line, can play some edge, but can also be a game wrecker in the middle, at least in my opinion. The two spots I'm looking for at Edmonton for them to upgrade are the backup quarterback position. We know, obviously, Tre Ford got cut. We'll talk about that in a little bit more. And the other spot is right guard, right? Carter O'Donnell came back from the NFL, filled that spot brilliantly late last year, but I'm expecting him to kick out to tackle this year. Gregor McKellar, one of their free agents from last season, did not pan out. I wonder if Ed Hervey could potentially be looking to pick his old team's pocket with Coulter Woodmansey and also Taylor Powell. It's possible. I'm not saying it's going to happen, but I think that everybody loves to pick their old team's pocket, and I think those are two guys who'd be perfect fits for the Elks.
I'll touch on two other teams in the West Division, the BC Lions in my neck of the woods. I don't know that they're going to have much money to spend in free agency after what they've given to their guys in-house, but certainly if you look at their secondary, that would be a spot where you would think they'd be looking to add a veteran or two after how they struggled at points last season. They did find one rookie last year who had a tremendous amount of promise. He's gone to the NFL and Robert Carter Jr., so they're going to have to find a way to replace him and beef up that secondary. There might be a sneaky ad in that area. And then the Calgary Stampeders, I look along the defensive line for that team. They lost Jalen Hutchings, who was an impact player at that defensive tackle spot, to the NFL. But also, don't forget, guys, Folarin Orimolade suffered that season-ending injury late in the campaign. I doubt he's going to be ready for the start of the season. He might miss a considerable amount of time. You need to find somebody to go on the opposite side from Clarence Hicks. They tried that late last year by bringing in Lorenzo Malden. I wonder if there's another option out there that they will try and acquire along the defensive line, because those are two pretty huge pieces that you're missing there that were key to the Stampeders' resurgence.
Along those lines, Jeremy O'Day did not think that the Riders would be very active, which makes sense. They're trying to retain the 44 pending free agents that they had to start the offseason. As of this recording, I believe they're down to 22, but they're just not going to afford everybody. And then you look at Hamilton and Montreal, and I think there could be some tinkering there, but largely those teams are looking to run it back. I'm not saying that they won't add some key pieces, but I think the cores for those teams, you can easily see them, which is why, we spent a bunch of time talking about Winnipeg, and Hodge laid out them spending some money on some free agents in there to get back up in the West Division, Ottawa trying to climb the standings, and Edmonton as well. So it should certainly be intriguing overall to see where some of the big name pieces land.
Canadian quarterback Nathan Rourke has signed a contract extension with the BC Lions through 2028, adding 2 years to his existing deal. The league's reigning MOP will earn the same amount of money he was originally due in 2026 at $684,000, though his earnings will increase over the next 2 years. Was this a better agreement for the Lions or for Rourke?
I think this was a good deal for both parties. But I'm going to say this was a better deal for the BC Lions, because even with the salary cap going up as much as it did, you've got Nathan Rourke for the same amount of money this season, which is a smaller percentage of your salary cap as a result. And I think in future years, he still left money on the table. This is a guy who is one of one in the CFL, not just the best quarterback in the league. He is a Canadian quarterback as well. He's one of just a handful of people who actually drive ticket sales and interest in the Canadian Football League. And you've got him, and he's got a local connection because he was born in Victoria. He's great in the community. He's everything that you want. If you're able to get him under contract for multiple years at a rate that is reasonable, and again, is a lower percentage of your cap than might otherwise have been the case because of these increases, well, I think you've done a pretty good job if you're Ryan Rigmaiden. So this is a slam dunk signing by the BC Lions.
You know what would be interesting is if hypothetically Nathan Rourke was a free agent and all the teams could bid on him, how much would they put forth? And then would they just let go of their current starter if there was a chance to get Rourke? And kudos to you, Hodge. You were probably one of one to have Rourke, excuse me, as the number one rated player on your TSN top 50 ballot leading into 2025. I mean, you do deserve credit for that. He certainly showed why. And as for his contract, he's taken the quarterback pay level back up to heights not seen pretty much at all during the salary cap era, but at least not since 2019 when Michael Riley left Edmonton to go to BC. That's who Rourke spent his first season in the CFL learning from. And Bo Levi Mitchell, who almost got to free agency that year, but made John Hufnagel get off his wallet, which was very rare in those days for the Calgary Stampeders, to pay him $675,000 in 2019. Riley earned $725,000 that same year. One important distinction, though, fellas, when we're comparing Rourke's contract to those two, there was no such thing as marketing money back then, uncapped marketing money. Could you imagine what Riley and Bo Levi Mitchell could have gotten on their deals added if there was uncapped marketing money? I think they might have pushed the $800,000 level, which is where I think Rourke might push if he was actually on the open market. I don't really ever think that's going to happen as long as he's playing at a high level. It seems like he's happy with the franchise there in BC, and he should be. But there's no doubt here that the Lions are getting a deal because of a number of different things to keep Rourke in tow. And I think Rourke also understands that you can't be making an astronomical amount of money and then expect to have a great team around you. And that's why I look at what happened with Michael Riley and his contract and Bo Levi Mitchell. Those didn't necessarily, not even necessarily, those didn't work out in terms of winning teams for either of those franchises. And those contracts were renegotiated multiple times. Part of that was because of the pandemic, but I think the other part of it was the salary cap was about $1 million less at that point, and those guys were taking up a big chunk of it. So I think this is a great win for the BC Lions overall, and as JC alluded to, for the Canadian Football League. We need to see Nathan Rourke on some Canadian advertising across the country, on TV, on billboards, on social media. He's the type of guy that I think can really drive interest, and I hope there's marketing people out there with the Lions or in the league that can get those kind of deals secured for Rourke.
I'll be 100% frank. If I was a CFL general manager and Nathan Rourke made it to free agency, I would be prepared to offer Nathan Rourke $1 million a season. I think Nathan Rourke is the best player in the CFL. I don't think it's particularly close. He's in the prime of his career, and he's somebody who makes everybody around him better. And he's somebody who I think has become a tremendous leader. And when you're looking at that, and then you add in the fact that he's Canadian, right? And very marketable in that regard. I think that he is by far and away the most valuable player in the CFL. And so I think if you're the BC Lions, you are laughing all the way to the bank. That's not to say Nathan, left $1 zillion on the table. But yeah, if Nathan really wanted to maximize his value, I don't have any doubt that if he said to the Lions, hey, I'm going to go win another MOP in 2006, only this time we're going to win the West Final, we're going to win the Grey Cup, and then I'm going to the window and listen to what everybody else has to offer, I wouldn't be surprised, honestly, if Nathan Rourke signed a contract at that point worth over $900,000, dare I say $1 million, if he really wanted to do that. Now, Nathan didn't want to do that. He wanted to stay in BC. He's very happy there. Him and his wife, Emily, right, love their lives out there. Nathan's made that super clear. So obviously I'm dealing with a hypothetical here, but that's the reason why I'm saying I think the Lions got the better of this deal. They have clarity on the game's most important position. They've got the league's most impressive player, and they've got him locked down through 2028 on a contract that, again, I think is below what he could get and potentially quite far below what he could hypothetically get on the open market. And I'd actually forgotten, now that you mentioned it, the TSN top 50 thing. Believe it or not, I had multiple people from the media at Grey Cup tell me that I was actually wrong for putting Nathan Rourke at 1, because they're like, well, but you were basing it off of what he did in 24, so you're actually wrong. And then he like became good later, so you're still wrong for having him 1. I'm like, had you never seen Nathan Rourke play football? Like, why are we only basing this off 2024? Like, the dude was put in an impossible situation in 24. And it was obvious to me that he was a great player who just had to be set up for more success. Like, nobody would have been successful under the parameters that Nathan Rourke was set forth in 2024. So enough of that. To me, the thing I'm really interested in, boys, is to see if Tre Ford could potentially be joining the BC Lions. I think he is tailor-made to be their backup. I would love to see him, especially with all the creativity that gets utilized in that run game there. We know that James Butler is back for 2 more years as a bell cow, but I would love to see Tre Ford utilized in that offense. Dare I say, even as a receiver, I think he is such a dangerous weapon. And at this point of his career, where he's now been cut, he's free to go wherever he wants, I think the BC Lions are the best fit. And I really hope that they don't shy away from using him in different ways. I don't think you ever take Nathan Rourke off the field, but there's no reason why you can't put Nathan Rourke and Tre Ford on the field at the same time, except for the fact that Justin Dunk might die of excitement. That's the only reason you wouldn't do it. So I want to see Tre Ford in BC selfishly, and I want to see him be successful with the Lions in very creative ways. Again, even if Nathan Rourke plays all 18 games, I want to see Tre Ford on the field doing cool, exciting stuff.
I completely agree with that. I think that would be the perfect fit for Tre Ford, as I've said on the podcast before. And I think Buck Pierce is creative enough as a play caller that he can find ways to utilize Ford, right? Whether it's Ford being out and trick plays and catching passes, or Rourke doing the same thing. Like, both of these guys are athletic enough to be used in different ways if you want to get them on the field simultaneously and take advantage of that rule change from a number of years ago, which not a lot of teams have since that came into place. I think you could do it with Ford. I think it would be great for him to learn behind a guy like Nathan, who I think is very comfortable in his position with the team and puts in as much work as anybody else. I think that would be a fantastic spot for Ford to grow and potentially get another starting job down the line.
It could make a lot of sense from the ratio perspective as well, which I think is what you guys are getting at. Nobody wants to see it, but if something happened to Nathan Rourke, you put Tre Ford in there, doesn't affect the ratio at all. And then I look across the league and think about, okay, well, who else is similar to the play style that Tre Ford has? And they're not the same, but Davis Alexander would sort of fit that mold if you're trying to have a backup quarterback that's similar to your starter. You know, I think Dustin Crum is in that mold as well, not as athletic as Tre Ford, but it would make some sense if Montreal had some interest in Tre Ford, or, like I said, a Dustin Crum, because I think that fits a similar style. And I think that's why Tre Ford potentially fits in BC. So a lot of eyes, definitely, as much as Hodge doesn't want to admit it or talk about it, going to be on that Canadian quarterback, Tre Ford.
I think the Calgary Stampeders are another intriguing thing there. And I don't know that they'd be willing to move on from a guy like PJ Walker, who they waited around for quite a bit to get. But when you talk about guys who play more similarly to Tre Ford, Vernon Adams Jr. is the first one who comes to my mind. And I think he's a great equivalency in the sense that for the first part of his career, VA was known for chaos. He was the guy that could never quite settle down and be that pocket passer and be that reliable starter. In a lot of ways, the same critiques that have been made about Tre Ford to this point in his career. I wonder if there was a spot for Ford in Calgary, if that would not be a good mentorship relationship, because in the past, when you've had guys like McLeod Bethel Thompson, who are supposed to be the mentors to Tre Ford, well, they've had very different careers and very different skill sets. They're not the same type of player. Even Cody Fajardo, who is admittedly more mobile, isn't quite the same trajectory in my mind. I think VA, in terms of his career path, is the closest comp to Tre Ford.
I think that's smart, and it should be noted, like PJ Walker, I asked about him to Dave Dickinson from the recent offseason winter avails from Calgary, and he was complimentary of what PJ Walker did, but he did say PJ Walker this offseason underwent surgery on his throwing shoulder, and the Stampeders haven't seen him throw since then and won't until like rookie camp when the quarterbacks come in. So I think that's a great point, JC.
The CFL's salary cap has jumped again due to increased league revenues, now reaching almost $6.3 million for the 2026 season. Justin, how did this come about, and do you anticipate similar increases in the future?
It came about because the league's baseline revenue increased by $10 million. So it's great to see the revenue growing. It would be interesting to hear in comparison what the expenses for the league are, but that's probably a closely guarded secret. Players probably don't necessarily care about that. I think there's a chance in the future for the revenue to grow. I did hear from talking to some people around the league that part of this $10 million increase is, I guess, what's the right word to use for this? Because of how well the Winnipeg Blue Bombers did? What were you going to say?
Beer money, beer sales.
That would be one, the beer snake that gets going at the games there in Winnipeg. But they had all the sellouts of the home games this year. The Grey Cup there went really well. That was a sellout too. So I think Winnipeg, from a business standpoint, definitely has become the model franchise in the league in terms of how they're driving revenue there. So I heard that was a big driver. You know, obviously Saskatchewan winning a Grey Cup helps all the merchandise sales and that kind of thing. But it's definitely a positive omen for the league that the cap has increased 2 straight years in a row. And then there was also some money from this revenue increase that the Players Association decided to use on bumping up training camp pay as well, which I think was needed. And that means that it's a little more fair for everybody instead of having the general managers decide who it's going to go to or whether or not the teams are actually going to spend to the ceiling of the salary cap instead of the floor.
I think that's great. And obviously, look, I think everybody deserves commendation here, right? The CFL, its member clubs, the CFLPA for getting this done. Like, everybody associated with the CFL, and we are obviously independent media. We criticize the CFL all the time, but obviously it's good news for us too if the CFL is doing well, right? And folks are invested, they're buying tickets, all those things. I'm also super interested to see what a new television deal could look like revenue-wise for the CFL. Like, the cap in relatively short order, guys, has gone up from $5.6 million to almost $6.3 million. Like, that's a relatively quick increase of quite a dramatic amount. And then when you look at the potential of a TV deal, which is reportedly worth $50 million, if, dare I say, that deal got to $75 million, $80 million a season, what could the cap like by 2030, could the CFL be an $8 million cap league, a $9 million cap league? I'm spitballing, but I think that's exciting for multiple reasons. Obviously, it's exciting for players who get that money. But the other thing I'm excited for, and this is a little soapbox of mine, I won't fully get on it today. There's better times for it. But I broke the story that Quentin Barrow is back in Hamilton on a 1-year deal worth $220,000. So for perspective, the highest paid American offensive lineman in the CFL in 2025 was Jamarcus Hardrick, earning in and around $215,000 a season. And it drives me crazy in the CFL when guys like Barrow, who have only played 25 games over 2 years, are suddenly free to go to the open market and get paid the sun and the moon and the stars. I think the CFL should become a league where incoming rookies make $100,000 minimum. I'm talking about a minimum. It's right now it's 70. I think it should be 100, but I think part of the trade-off for that should be incoming Americans should be locked in for 3 years. It could be 100, 105, and 110. And I think incoming Canadians should be 4 years. It should be 100 and then maybe 105, 110, 115. And now we've got a league where everybody's making 6 figures, but we've also prevented this crazy player transience that has improved, certainly. And we've talked about this for years. It's gotten better. but I still think there's room to grow because fans want to recognize the players on their teams. They want to feel like they have guys they can come back and cheer for year after year after year. Yeah, it's exciting when your team adds a star receiver or a star pass rusher or whatever, but you still want to have those staples who spend 6, 8, 10, 12 seasons with the same club. So I'm super excited that the cap's going up, and I hope that this leads to what I would describe as a better framework for player compensation, leading to less player transiency across the league.
And you need better player compensation. Sorry, JC, go ahead.
No, I think that's a smart point, Hodge, and I'll let you do your point because I think it's more related to what Hodge just said. I want to take things in a slightly different direction, but I think your point about restricted free agencies and increased base salaries is well taken.
In total, since 2022, the league's baseline revenue number has grown $31 million. So to Hodge's point, if that can continue to grow, I think you need the salary cap lift to ideally keep happening to draw the American talent up here. I know you guys talked about it last week on the show with NIL and the quarterback talent, but I think just overall to draw that talent up here besides the quarterback. So that would be in an ideal world. And ultimately, that's really Stuart Johnston's main goal as commissioner, is to drive league revenues. And then the second one would be, that goes alongside that, increase franchise values. If you're doing that hand in hand, then the cap should continue to go up. But that's the challenge that Stuart Johnston has in front of him.
And I'll just hop in super quick, JC. One of the reasons I believe Americans only have to sign for 2 years is because that was established at a time when there was no NFL window. So in other words, if you were coming up to the CFL as a rookie American, you were making a 2-year commitment. Even if you went for, your receiver goes for 1,500 yards as a rookie, you can't test the NFL between your first season and your second season. You're making a 2-year commitment to Canada. Well, now, as has been established on the most recent CBA, any player can test the NFL any offseason regardless of contract status. So why are we only locking in American players for 2 years and Canadians in for 3? As far as I'm concerned, it should be 3 years for Americans, then an RFA year. It should be 4 years for Canadians, then an RFA year. I think it would be a win for teams, building continuity. It'd be a win for fans, getting to cheer for the same players year after year. And I still think, as much as it wouldn't be a win for the players in the short term, what you then see is more money going to older players, which is actually what the PA wanted in the first place with the establishment of the whole naturalized Canadian thing, which I think has been kind of silly, to be honest. So I think, if Quentin Barrow is back, for example, with the Ticats this year at 110, maybe there's money for Tim White, right? Or maybe there's money for the Ticats to keep Coulter Woodmansee, right? Or guys who either aren't back or might not be back, rather than saying, oh, this guy's 25 and, he's only played 25 games for us, but we have to pay him Jamarcus Hardrick money or he's leaving. Like, I don't think that's good for the league. I don't think it's good for the Ticats. I don't think it's good for the fans. And in the short term, it's good for a guy like Barrow. In the long term, I'm not convinced it is.
Yeah, I agree with everything you guys just said, but when I saw this announcement, my mind went in a slightly different direction. And bear with me here because I'm sure you'll both have some thoughts on this topic. The $31 million of revenue increase over the last, 3 years since 2022, that's a pretty substantial number, right? I think that's a good indication of the health of the league. Now, is it pure profit? No, we don't know what their losses are. But to me, it's interesting when the league is touting a $10 million increase on one hand, right, for 1 year, and $31 million over the past 3 years. And then the commissioner in his addresses is, on the other hand, saying, well, 7 of the 9 franchises lose money all the time. To me, those two facts...
Has he said that verbatim?
He has. And he said most of our teams are losing money at his winter meetings address, right? That is something that keeps getting brought up consistently, right? Now, could that be true? I'm not an accountant, right? I don't know how much the losses are here. We don't see the books of anybody except Saskatchewan or Winnipeg because they're publicly owned clubs. But to me, it is a little bit suspect when you are citing the fact that your teams lose money consistently and you are using that as a justification for instituting changes that are, drastic in some cases and unpopular with a certain segment of the fan base, but then you're also citing a large amount of revenue growth. That is tough for me to mesh in my mind. And again, I'm not a math guy. I can't see the books, but it's certainly interesting that it seems to fly in the face of some of the narratives that we've heard about the CFL in recent years.
Two big-name CFL receivers have found homes in free agency, with Tim White joining the Blue Bombers and Austin Mack signing with the Edmonton Elks. White was released by the Ticats when it became clear the team wasn't going to offer him an extension, while Mack was cut prior to a $45,000 offseason roster bonus. Which was the bigger and better signing?
I think it's Austin Mack by a hair. I think Austin Mack is a lot better of a player than we saw in 2025 when he was hamstrung by a hamstring injury for a lot of the year and was obviously surpassed in that offense by guys like Tyson Philpott and Tyler Snead. We haven't really seen a healthy Austin Mack since 2023 in the CFL, but I mean, the last time he was healthy, he helped that team win a Grey Cup. And the person he did it with is Cody Fajardo, right? And I think when you look at their kind of built-in chemistry, how desperately Edmonton needed a number one target. Like there were times last year where it felt like Cody Fajardo was throwing the ball to Stephen Dunbar Jr. and just a bunch of guys, right? I'm not saying there's not other receivers in that receiving core who are good, but there were times where it felt like Cody Fajardo was almost a man on his own. And, maybe weren't a lot of options except for checking it down to Justin Rankin, who is, to his credit, excellent after the catch. But regardless, he's 28, and that's why I think it's a little bit of a better signing than White. I do think White is a good signing. White has consistently stayed healthy during his tenure in the CFL. He's a 4-time All-East Division selection, 3-time All-CFL selection, and I love the fact that he's got lots of experience in Tommy Condell's offense. Tommy Condell was the OC in Hamilton for White's first 3 seasons there. He is, of course, now the offensive coordinator in Winnipeg. But White is 31, turning 32 this season. As a kind of a speed guy, I'm not saying he doesn't have other skills, but as a speed guy, I question if he's going to be an effective receiver 3, 4, 5 years from now. So this seems like a shorter term thing for White in Winnipeg, which is why I think that the better signing, not by a lot, but by a little bit, was Austin Mack in Edmonton.
Nobody's as fast as they were 3, 4, 5 years ago.
No, and that's what I'm saying. Like Tim White ran a 4.51 coming out of college, where he was also a track sensation. So I think he's somebody who, will be slowing down a little bit. Could he still be, help take the top off of defense? Yeah, I think so. Nick Dembski's older than White, and Nick Dembski is still finding ways to get behind opposing defenders. But age matters, right? And Austin Mack is not 10 years younger than Tim White, but he is 3 years younger, and I think that makes a difference.
I love the fit of Austin Mack in Edmonton for all the reasons that you laid out, Hodge, but I really do think you're underselling this Tim White signing by the Bombers, because White has his flaws. We've talked about his quiet stretches in the past. We've talked about his drops. I think all of those things are valid, and I think it's valid that you bring up his age and the fact that he might not quite be the same player that he used to be. But we're talking about a guy who's been a 1,000-yard receiver for 4 straight years. And when you talk about how you viewed the Edmonton offense as being one guy and a bunch of other people, that's how I saw the Winnipeg Blue Bombers, right? Nick Dembski was their one shining star, and they didn't really have anything else until Ontario Wilson came back from the NFL late in the season. Now, you still have Ontario, you still have Dembski. I think those are 2 great components to have, but White can still be successful as a complementary secondary or tertiary piece to that offense. He has shown that he can be productive, and I think he brings a nice deep threat element there. If you're not relying on him to be your number one, then you can live with a few of those drops and you can live with a few of those quiet stretches. So I think the Bombers got dramatically better by adding White into that offense because I thought they needed a lot of help there.
This is a tough question. And I'm going to side, I think, with JC because Tim White still has lots of explosiveness. And we're not looking at this signing 3, 4, 5 years down the road. I believe he only signed a 2-year contract anyway. The Bombers are wanting to win with this core right here, right now. That's part of the reason White is there. And could you imagine if he caught the football consistently, how many yards this guy would have? Now, Ticats fans will tell you, and I'm not joking around, it's talked about by people around the league. Fans of the Hamilton Tiger Cats will talk about it all the time. I think there's some fans in Hamilton that would have liked to have seen the Ticats move on for him much earlier. But if he catches a football consistently, this guy could have 12, 13, 14, 1,500 yards. Some people might think I'm crazy, but he's dropped some big-time balls in big-time situations and cost the Ticats games at times. Now, if he becomes more consistent, and we can always all improve, Tim White can be absolutely dynamite in an offense with a coordinator as Hodge laid out, in Condell, who knows how to use him. I do think that Austin Mack provides a safety net, kind of a target for Cody Fajardo, a guy that he knows, and a guy, possibly more importantly for Mack, who had his best season with Fajardo throwing him the football. Over 1,000 yards, was a CFL All-Star, earned that training camp shot with the Atlanta Falcons based off that season as the two won a Grey Cup together. So I think that's a really key signing too. The critical part for Austin Mack is going to be, it's obvious, stay on the field. I had one person in the league describe Mack to me as a flash in the pan. And I think they're referring to that 2023 season where he was really good, among the best in the league, and potentially in an argument might have been top of the league that year for the way that he burst onto the scene. But he's got to stay on the field and prove that he's not the flash in the pan type of a guy. So I think it fits there for multiple reasons. I don't necessarily think a lot of people thought Tim White would end up in Winnipeg, though. Yes, there's the Condell connection, but that is why, to me, I think the bigger signing is Mack because Edmonton had a much bigger need at the receiver position. Did Winnipeg need help? I think you could argue that. He adds that explosive element that some other teams were interested in bringing him in for as well. But Edmonton really needed that guy who at least has the upside of being a legitimate number one receiver. I can't talk today, in the past.
Whoa.
I will say-
I thought you said you were going to agree with me. Then you talked yourself into agreeing with Hodge.
Well, I was just talking about in terms of his explosiveness, I guess, and it's really close. Like we're picking
I will
between
say,
two high-end receivers
Justin
here.
is not the first person to, at the start, say you're wrong, and then after time say, actually, now that I've thought about all the angles, you might just be right. There we go. Tim White signed a 1-year deal, Winnipeg. Austin Mack, it was a 2-year deal in Edmonton, just for the record. And I also did, during the Thursday media availability over Zoom with Tim White, ask him about the drops. I said, if there's a knock on your game, it's the fact that you've had some costly drops. What would you say to your critics? And the full quote is in my article about it if you want to check it out at 3DownNation.com. But to paraphrase, he essentially said, yeah, I recognize that I've had those issues. 2024 was a particularly bad year for me with drops. I worked on it in 2025. I'm going to continue working on it because I'm always trying to get better. So I thought Tim White did a good job of speaking to the drops. He didn't deny it. He didn't try to sugarcoat it. He acknowledged it, and I'm excited to see how he does in Winnipeg, because if he thinks Ticats fans could be obnoxious when he drop a big ball, I think Bomber fans might even be a little bit louder in those regards.
Well, buckle up, folks. It's the moment you've all been waiting for, because, Dunk, you secured an exclusive interview with Canadian QB Taylor Elgersma. It was the first time he's spoken publicly since being released by the Green Bay Packers and working out for 4 different NFL teams. That article was the most read article over the last week on 3DownNation by a wide margin. What stood out to you in your conversation?
That was very surprising to me, and it's honestly the main reason we're talking about Taylor Elgersma right now. I had to convince Hodge and beat the data over his head that people are interested in this guy, even though CFL free agency is about to kick off or has already kicked off behind the scenes. Let's be real. But what stood out to me the most from talking to Elgersma, and I did so at Todd Galloway's introductory press conference as he was officially named the Wilfrid Laurier University Golden Hawks football head coach, was the fact that Taylor Elgersma had the foresight, and I'll say the cojones, after he was released by the Green Bay Packers, to go and ask to talk to the head coach, Matt LaFleur. Like, what kid in their early 20s, after being released, doesn't usually just pack up their stuff and leave, but thinks, no, I should go talk to the head coach and get feedback for how it can be better, and also thank them for taking a swing on me. That stood out to me as incredible. I've never really heard about anything like that before. And Elgersma told me that he felt like that was important because he was a Canadian coming from a Canadian university, and he needed to, and I'm paraphrasing here, but pay his respects to the Packers football operations staff and the coaching staff for even signing him and bringing him in. He realizes that he hasn't played the 4-down American game at all in his life, literally up until the Senior Bowl last year in 2025, and then got that shot with the Packers because of how well he did there, and then at his pro day in Buffalo, and looked really good in training camp for the Packers, so much so that I think him and people in his camp, and even Mike Miller, who's the Toronto Argonauts head coach right now, that tutored Elgersma for 2 years during the CFL quarterback internship program, thought he had won the number 3 job. That didn't happen. It went to Clayton Tune, who looked god-awful at the end of the season when he got in a game for the Green Bay Packers. But I digress. The other nugget that jumped out to me when I was talking to Elgersma and then doing the research was the fact that every single other quarterback that was in that 2025 Senior Bowl evaluation week and then ultimately the game is currently on an NFL roster. And a handful of them played in games last season. You know, you look at the list, it's pretty unbelievable. Jackson Dart, of course, started with the New York Giants. He was picked in the first round. Tyler Shuck looks like he might be the franchise guy in New Orleans. Dylan Gabriel started games for the Browns. Riley Leonard, Jalen Milroe, and Will Howard were all on rosters for the season. And Seth Hannigan had a stint with the Jags and then signed a futures deal with the Colts. So literally every quarterback from that Senior Bowl is on an NFL roster except for Elgersma. And I think it ultimately comes down to not a bias against Canadian quarterbacks, but the fact that he needs more tape out there playing the American game. So the scouts and general managers and coaches can get more of a sample size, even though he looked really good in the preseason. So it's very clear to me that Elgersma remains focused on trying to get an NFL contract. I did talk to him about how he feels in terms of the opportunity that he could have to play for the Winnipeg Blue Bombers. I referred to it as a backup plan. He quickly corrected me and said he doesn't refer to it as a backup plan. He's very respectful of the organization there, of the Canadian Football League, but right now just remains focused on the NFL. So this kid is wise beyond his years, fellas, and I get the feeling that he might be a guy that has a long pro career. You know, I got that feeling, and I've talked about this a little bit, about Nathan Rourke way back in the day when he was down playing high school in Alabama, went to Fort Scott Junior College and progressed through the ranks. There was just something about him. And it's similar with Taylor Elgersma. Todd Galloway, the head coach at Laurier, was joking around with him about having, and I hope I'm saying the word right, an idyllic memory where he just memorizes stuff so fast. Elgersma was telling me that they could be installing... Eidetic, that's it.
Idyllic is like a meadow. Like it's a nice picture. It's an idyllic meadow. You know,
in a way, though,
beautiful.
eidetic and idyllic memory are somewhat synonymous. But yes, it's eidetic.
Idyllic is the way that I look at Elgersma. Eidetic is his memory, it sounds
exactly.
Well said. Yes, correct.
The last nugget I'll share, and he didn't say this on the record, but he was telling me after when we were talking about it, is that during training camp with the Packers, Matt LaFleur could install as many as 150 different plays per day in training camp. And this kid was picking it up with that great memory that he has. Let me just refer to it as that so I don't sound like a complete goofball. But there's a long story to watch here with what happens with Elgersma. He was selected in the UFL quarterback draft by the Birmingham Stallions, who are coached by former NFL quarterback and Alabama Crimson Tide star A.J. McCarron. So that opportunity is out there for him as well. Elgersma, certainly a guy that all Canadian football fans and even American football fans should keep an eye on.
Well, I also have an eidetic memory, and I'm surprised you didn't know that. Justin. That's right, Justin. Surprised you didn't know that. By the way, as an aside, great article on Elgersma. I know there's another one coming. I'm looking forward to our readers seeing it. I don't know if there's a more one-sided beef in the world than Justin Dunk and Clayton Toon, to the point where I really hope that Clayton Toon, he's 25. I just looked it up. I really hope, 26. He's currently under contract with the Columbus Aviators of the UFL. Maybe he'll be throwing passes to Tyreek McAllister, former CFL standout this year. I hope he signs a CFL contract. I hope he becomes a star, and I hope you have to interview him. And I hope he hears our podcast.
He'd be awful up here. He can't even throw the football well on an NFL field, let alone a bigger CFL field.
Just more fuel to the fire, baby. I can't wait for Clayton Toon to come up.
Is he on a neg list? Let's find out.
Yeah, look it up. Actually,
I'm doing it right now.
First, you should read your random neg lister, then check the neg list while I'm doing the heritage moment.
Okay, perfect. I will do that then. It is now time for JC's random neg lister while I'm on the subject of the neg list. And I got some criticism this week, guys, or at least a comment from a fan on X who said, hey, have you ever actually done a tie cat on your random neg lister segment? And I thought back and I realized, I try and spread them out, but I don't think I have. Hamilton has been ignored. So I'm changing that right now with a name that you guys might recognize. Obviously, Greg Bell is hitting or seems to be headed towards free agency. So what about James Robinson out of Illinois State? This guy ran for 1,070 yards and 7 touchdowns as an undrafted rookie with the Jacksonville Jaguars in 2020. Had a stint in the NFL that lasted for 40 career games, over 2,000 career rushing yards, 18 TDs, another 615 yards receiving, and 5 more scores through the air. Had his production tail off after an Achilles injury at the end of the 2021 season and bounced around to the Jets, Pats, Giants, Packers, and Saints. Was last in a camp in 2024, but he's still just 27, and he's rumored to be making a comeback in pro football. There's some talk about the UFL being a destination, but I think he could be a perfect fit for the Hamilton Tiger Cats at a position that they may need to find a replacement at. He was a beast in college, 4,444 yards and 44 touchdowns for Illinois State. That is not a misnomer. It's all fours across the board when it comes to James Robinson. And I think he's a guy that you should have your eye on if you're a Ticats fan.
It's the time for Hodge's heritage moment on this day in 1957. We're going vintage today. Bud Grant was hired as the head coach of the Winnipeg Blue Bombers, becoming the youngest head coach in the history of professional football at 29. Grant led the team to 4 Grey Cup victories in 6 appearances and a regular season record of 102, 56, and 2 over 10 seasons. He then left for the NFL in 1967 when he became the head coach of the Minnesota Vikings, a role the Wisconsin native held for 18 years. Grant led the team to a 158, 96, and 5 record with 4 Super Bowl appearances, retiring as the 8th winningest head coach in NFL history, and I believe the winningest in pro football history if you combine CFL and NFL. A statue of Grant was unveiled outside of Princess Auto Stadium in Winnipeg in 2014. He is a member of the Canadian Football and Professional Football Halls of Fame, and sadly, he passed away in 2023 at the age of 95. Bud Grant, football legend. Nobody deserves that title more.
Let's go to the 3-minute drill.
What about Clayton Toon?
We got to get the Clayton Toon update because, like Bud Grant, he's a football legend. No, I'm joking. He is not on a CFL neg list, so it would appear that front offices across the league agree with you, Dunk. He can't cut it in the CFL.
Whoa. Let's editorialize a little bit. He's not on an egg list yet.
That is true. We will update you when he is, and the headline will read, Clayton Tune, Justin Dunk's arch nemesis, added to X team's neg list.
In the story you broke, Hodge, offensive lineman Quentin Barrow re-signed with the Hamilton Tiger Cats. Is he a budding star in the league?
I mean, it's hard for an lineman to become a star, but honestly, yes. If you are at the age of 25, worth the same financial investment as Jamarcus Hardrick, you are a budding star. And he was great, I thought, for the Ticats in 25. The BC Lions released veteran linebacker Micah Awe. Do you think he'll get another CFL contract?
I do think he'll land somewhere at some point. He's probably not the first option for anybody in the league as your starting middle linebacker, but when somebody goes down or you don't get the guy you were hoping for in free agency, you can't argue with the fact that Micah Awe is productive. He is the ultimate stopgap, and I think some team is going to be happy that he's available. The Ottawa Redblacks released longtime returner Devontae Dedmon, and he has since signed with the Montreal Alouettes. Do you think he's still got game left?
It's possible. Clearly, the Alouettes believe so, but I thought James Fletcher Jr. was actually pretty good. So let's see if Dedmon still has some juice in them legs. Hodge, you reported that Chris Jones, former CFL head coach and general manager, has taken an NCAA coaching job. What school is he at?
So he's at Louisiana at Monroe. It's the same school that Caleb Evans, Montreal Alouettes pending free agent quarterback, attended. He is going to be the defensive passing game coordinator, and he's working with some of the defensive backs. I think his official title is safeties coach. So we'll have to wait and see how the Warhawks look on defense with the help of Chris Jones. Longtime CFL receiver Keaton Bruggeling has made the Olympic bobsled team. How cool is that?
It is very cool, and he's not alone in terms of the CFL contingent on that bobsled team. Shaquille Murray-Lawrence, the longtime CFL running back, and Jay Dearborn, former starting Sam linebacker for the Saskatchewan Roughriders, are both on the Olympic team, as is Lucas Stoikos, who is an 8th-round draft pick of the BC Lions. Just last year, he was in camp with the Lions, got cut. Now he's an Olympian. Not a bad bounce back. Toronto Argonauts draft pick Paris Shand signed in the UFL. Do you think we'll ever see him in Canada?
I would imagine at some point, but for now, he's trying to get that money stateside. Brady Oliveira and Milt Stegall have both been honored with snowplows in the Peg. How did this happen?
Well, they hosted, the city of Winnipeg, a Name That Plow contest, and Milt Stegall and Grady Oliveira were two of the winners. Neither are as good as Snow Takey Mitchell, but I mean, they're both pretty darn good.
Bring that article back. We got to repost it today.
Longtime listeners of the podcast, if you know, you know. John Gruden gave props to former CFL linebacker Alex Singleton after his standout AFC divisional performance against the Buffalo Bills. How cool was that?
It was very cool, and it was cool to see Gruden highlighting Singleton's journey through the CFL. It's unfortunate that we won't get to see Singleton vying for a Super Bowl next week, but he had a hell of a year, especially considering that he had surgery for cancer in the middle of it and only missed one game. Dexter McCoyle has been named the safeties coach at Louisiana Tech. Do you think the former CFL defender will continue climbing the collegiate coaching ranks?
I think so. He was always a smart player in the Canadian Football League. Let's see how far he can take it as a coach. The Hamilton Tiger Cats have re-signed quarterbacks Jake Dolegala and Harrison Frost. Hodge, you kind of talked about this earlier, but what could those moves mean for Taylor Powell?
Well, I think it means Taylor Powell's not going to be back. And if I was a betting man, I would say Edmonton, the most likely destination for Powell in free agency. For the first time in many years, JC, no Canadian players will compete in the Super Bowl. Are you disappointed?
I'm not just disappointed. I am devastated, and maybe I won't even watch the game in protest. We need Canadians in the Super Bowl for it to be relevant. Who's even going to watch now? The Toronto Argonauts released veteran offensive lineman Darius Sirocco and edge rusher Derek Parrish. Was that a surprise?
Sirocco made sense because we knew the Dakota Shepley move was coming, but Derek Parrish, I thought, was a guy that flashed some upside. We talked about him leading into the season. Although that probably means that Jim Barker has another move up his sleeve in CFL free agency. Stay tuned. Stanley Bryant is back for year 17 in the Canadian Football League. Hodge, what's his secret to longevity?
Stan had the best answer for this. He's like, I have no idea. And he said if somebody came up to him as a rookie and said, Stan, how do I play in the CFL for so long? His answer would be, get on your knees and say a prayer, my brother. Like he has no idea what has allowed him to play for so long, which I think is actually kind of awesome. Like, guy just keeps being great. Was PFF's 6th graded offensive tackle in 2025. He used to be by far and away the number 1 tackle in the league. That's not true anymore, but he's still a very serviceable left tackle, which is pretty impressive considering the age and the mileage. Dejon Allen has signed back with the BC Lions after an injury-plagued year in 25. Was that a necessary signing?
It was a necessary signing, especially considering it's looking more and more like Jarrell Broxton is going to be hitting free agency and at least testing the market. If Broxton leaves, you have Dejon Allen, who can play one tackle spot, and they re-signed Chris Slugger, who can fill the other one. Neither is as good as Broxton at this stage in their career, in my mind, but at least you have 2 competent tackles to protect that big contract in Nathan Rourke. Burgeoning halfbacks Destin Talbot and DeMarcus Fields re-signed with Hamilton and Saskatchewan, respectively. Are those smart moves?
Definitely, man. I love me some Destin Talbot. I think he's a fast riser, played at an elite level at that all-important boundary halfback spot in 2025. So made a lot of sense for Orlando Steinauer and the Ticats to lock him down. Travis Tice, the running back in Montreal, signed an extension with the Alouettes through 2027. Was that a good move?
Absolutely. The offense in Montreal wasn't super run heavy, and they shared the load between him and Sean Thomas Erlington and Stevie Scott III. But I think Travis Tice in the right system as the full-time starter could be a 1,200, dare I say, 13 or 1,400 yard guy out of the back. And honestly, I think he could do it through the air too. I think Travis Tice is an absolute monster. I really do. The rosters for the CFL Invitational Combine and National Combine have been set. JC, I know you could talk for 24 hours about these guys, but I'm going to challenge you. Who is the one player, one and one, who is the only player you're excited to see?
The sexy name at the top of our article was, of course, Georgia State quarterback Christian Vieilleux. I think I have a good sense of Vieilleux, so I'm going in a different direction. I want another quarterback, McGill QB, Aloha Latendresse Regimbold. This guy fascinates me because of his athleticism. Is he the next Tre Ford? Is he the next Brad Sinopoli? Is he neither? I'm going to be looking to find out at the CFL Combine. Keyshawn Johnson signed a 2-year contract extension to stay with the Saskatchewan Roughriders. Did you think they could afford him?
I did, yeah, but I think it helped that Dante Myers went to the NFL and signed with the Cincinnati Bengals. Then you can focus on Keyshawn Johnson, who, according to GM Jeremy O'Day, wanted to stay in Saskatchewan and run it back with the green and white. In a story 3DownNation broke, the Toronto Argonauts signed former first-round CFL draft pick by the Saskatchewan Roughriders, Dakota Shepley, following a 6-year run in the NFL. How significant is Shepley for the Boatmen?
Tremendously. This offensive line simply couldn't cut the mustard in 25. I think they have to move Ryan Hunter back to guard. I think he's got to gain some weight. I think you got Dakota Shepley at the other guard spot. And then Peter Nicastro, who for some stupid reason was on the bench to start the year, needs to start at center. You've now got a really good interior. You got to improve, I think, at the tackle spots, but that interior, I think, is on par with any other in the CFL if those guys reach at the top of their game. Last one, the Ticats cut veteran Canadian receiver Drew Wolodarski. Was that a surprise?
It wasn't. He had an off-season bonus coming, and he wasn't productive last year. Couldn't stay on the field. There still might be some upside with Wolodarski somewhere, but it made sense for Hamilton to move on.
For Justin Dunk and JC Abbott, I am low energy John Hodge. Enjoy CFL free agency, and I hope you have a great day.